So it's that time of the week again where we take a look at this week's power rankings. We are heading into week 9 now, so we're more than 2 months into the NHL season. A couple of shakeups in the Pacific Division, and we have to talk about the guys behind me as well. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe. Let's take a look at this week's power rankings. Alright, so to start things off, as we usually do, taking a look at the Eastern Conference in the Metropolitan Division. At number 8 this week, staying at number 8, is the New Jersey Devils. The Devils are 7-9-4 on the season, 2-1 this week. So pretty solid week overall for the New Jersey Devils. Their record is still pretty poor overall. Taylor Hall seems to be getting things going a little bit. Not too great, but he's playing okay. One of their bigger games being against the Montreal Canadiens, where they came back. And they actually won that one. Kyle Palmieri getting the overtime game winner. A real nice momentum shift, hopefully in the season for the Devils. I feel like I've said that before, but we'll see. They did release Corey Schneider. He was on waivers. He's down in the American Hockey League. So Louis Domingue and Mackenzie Blackwood are the goaltending tandem for the Devils for probably the foreseeable future. They had a really tough loss against the Boston Bruins as well, where they got completely mauled at home. Hopefully that's a sign of, maybe a little bit of a humbling thing. I feel like they've had that enough to start the year. But hopefully they turn this around. That was a good game in Montreal. A pretty solid Canadiens team on the road up in Montreal. So we'll see what the Devils can do with that moving forward. But I am a little bit concerned with the Devils in terms of their goaltending. We'll see what happens with the Devils. So at number 7, the New York Rangers are at number 7 this week. 10-6-2 on the season, 1-1 this week. The New York Rangers had a decent week. They played the Florida Panthers, lost 5-4 in overtime in Florida. Pretty close game overall. And then they beat the Washington Capitals, so a pretty solid game there at home for the Rangers. Beat the Capitals on Wednesday Night Hockey, a good little rivalry between those two teams. Not recent memory over the last 2 or 3 years, but definitely in the 2010s, the early 2010s, they had some really good playoff matches pretty much every year. So really good to see the Rangers get on track a little bit. This is what I've talked about the Rangers in the past. They have great players on this team. They just need to be more consistent. That's been an issue with this team. Hopefully moving, here toward the holidays and into 2020, the Rangers can put together a little bit more of a consistent effort. I think they're going to find some success. So looking at number 6, moving down a couple spots this week, is the Philadelphia Flyers. 11-7-4 on the season, 1-2-1 this week. They lost the New York Islanders. That was really their big game this week, where they lost to the Islanders. In that one, they had a 3-goal lead, blew the lead, and the Islanders ended up winning that one. It was a couple of mental mistakes by a team, some weird line changes, as well as a bench minor. So some miscommunications, some arguments that, Alain Vigneault, making some line changes, shifting guys around. They aren't used to playing with certain guys, so the line changes have been a little bit off. It might have showed in that game. Good news, though, they did win a game where they were down. They ended up coming back, so that's good for the Philadelphia Flyers. A little bit of a confidence boost in that one, but nonetheless, definitely a little bit of a blip there for the Philadelphia Flyers. They played really solid throughout the month of November. This was definitely a lull in the month of November for them, but it's plenty of time in the season to turn things around. They're just on the outside of the playoffs. I think that's where they probably wouldn't have wanted to be. They'd want to be in a playoff spot right now, but man, looking at this Metro Division, it's a little bit difficult of a task. That's definitely, they got to be playing a little bit better if they really want to be in that conversation right now. Moving up a spot this week at number 5 is the Columbus Blue Jackets. 9-8-4 on the season, 3-0 this week. So an undefeated week for the Blue Jackets moves them up pretty high here. They don't have the great record and that some of these other teams do. They're 9-12. They're 3 games under 500. They could definitely be playing a little bit better, but that defense, man, is really solid. The goaltending played pretty well this week as well, and the Blue Jackets are chugging along. Some of that depth, some guys you've maybe never heard of, including myself, they're coming in, they're playing some roles, and they're finding ways to get victories. So good for the Blue Jackets moving up in this week's power rankings. Pretty difficult division as well. So at number 4, moving up a couple spots, is the Pittsburgh Penguins, 11-7-4 on the season, 1-1-2 this week. The 2 overtime losses coming on a back-to-back, a home and home with the New York Islanders. They really wanted to beat the Islanders, you could tell. They did have a good game, though, as well, where they beat the Toronto Maple Leafs, really stomping the Leafs 6-1 at home. It really was, a pretty quick ending in that one. The Penguins looked really solid. They're playing very well considering they just got back Patrick Hornquist. Chris Letang is out of the lineup, and Sidney Crosby. I know that's the excuses you're going to hear why they didn't beat the Islanders and things like that. All teams around the league have injuries. You look at Dallas, John Klingberg's out of the lineup. Rupe Hintz, one of their best, scoring producers. I'm not saying it's an excuse. Sidney Crosby is an unbelievable player, but you got to find a way to get things going. You still have Genny Malkin, who's plays unreal, really when Sidney Crosby's out of the lineup as well. So Jared McCann's been playing very well. Brandon Tanev, turned it on, over the last week or two. So good for those guys. Brian Rust playing very well. They just couldn't find a way to beat the Islanders, who have been really hot to start the season. It's really to no fault of Pittsburgh. They were right there. They just couldn't find a way to beat the Islanders. Number 3 is the Carolina Hurricanes, 13-8-1 on the season, 2-1 this week. The Carolina Hurricanes are playing some pretty impressive hockey. Over the last, throughout the month of November, it's been a little bit of a slide for them, but they found a way to bounce back this week. They had a really great start to the season in October. Definitely faltered here in November, but they're picking it up again. The goaltending is definitely a little concerning for Carolina. They have some issues to figure out. They luckily had a little bit of a lighter schedule this week in terms of the opponent, but they were able to find a way to win games that they should win. They just need to do that a little bit more consistently. And like I said, goaltending, definitely a little bit concerning right now for the Hurricanes. But they still find themselves at number 3 in the power rankings, so can't complain too much. So at number 2, they're not at number 1 anymore. The Washington Capitals are at number 2 this week. 15-4-5 on the season. 1-2-1 this week. The weakest stretch, in terms of a week that they've had this season so far. We're, 9 weeks into the season, and they had a tough week. I mean, you played a couple of games. You maybe feel like you should have won. You had the Ranger game, which they usually, play pretty well in Madison Square Garden against the Rangers. Couldn't get it done on Wednesday night, but, they had a couple of other games where they really should have had games. They should have had more wins than they did. And, you're going to have stretches like this where, they're playing so well and maybe you kind of let off the gas a little bit and teams just take you out at that moment. So, maybe it's a little bit of a humbling moment here for the Capitals. They move forward from this because they're not at the top of the division anymore, especially when this team is here and has been knocking on the door for the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's kind of what happens because at number 1, for the first time in goal line hockey power rankings history, the New York Islanders are at the top spot in the Metropolitan Division for Week 9's Metropolitan Division power rankings. The Islanders are 16-3-1 on the season, 3-0 this week. They had a home and home with the Penguins, won both of those, and they beat the Philadelphia Flyers. So they've had some success with the Pennsylvania teams this week. Probably not too happy, though, in Pennsylvania, those fans. Probably not too happy with the Islanders this week. Just to put in perspective, 16-3-1, that's 16-4 overall. So basically every one loss the Islanders have had to start the season, they've had 4 wins. So basically they've been winning 4 of 5 games so far to start the season. Unbelievable start for the Islanders. And the first 3 or 4 games, the Islanders really didn't come out too strong. They looked uninterested, unmotivated, and since then have been on this unbelievable 16-game winning streak. And make sure to check out the video I'll be posting talking about the Islanders winning streak, so make sure to check that out. All right, so let's move on to the Atlantic Division. All right, so taking a look at the Atlantic Division to start things off at number 8. Back at number 8, because they lost to the team that was here last week, is the Detroit Red Wings. So the Red Wings are 8-13-2 to start the season, 1-1 this week. There's a lot of issues with this Detroit team, and we've seen other teams that really have struggled to start the season at least put together a couple of wins here and there, at least pick up overtime points. The Red Wings really don't have any of that. They're really struggling here to start the year. I don't know what it is. They just don't have the depth on this team. Franz Nielsen just picked up his first point the other night of the season. The Ottawa Senators beat the Detroit Red Wings. So it's just a really tough start to the season for the Red Wings. And what seemed like they were really moving up last week. They were undefeated during the week last week, and can't say the same this week, unfortunately, for the Red Wings. It seems like every team has, every player on every team seems to have a book on Jimmy Howard, just shoot up high above his shoulders. He's really struggled with those high shots. I don't know what it is. We knew, though, going into the season, Jimmy Howard was a lottery, and that was really taking a risk putting in Howard. And, he's been a very good goaltender in his career with the Red Wings, but you got to think it's probably close to that time now. They need to put someone else in there. Jonathan Bernier really hasn't been too much better, so it's kind of, the worst of the two. It's kind of, you could have an argument for either one, but, the goal scoring hasn't really been there. Like I said, the depth. Franz Nielsen just picked up his first point of the season. Robbie Fabry is a good pickup. That's the one thing that the Red Wing fans can look to right now, because that was a really good move by Steve Yzerman. It's not going to pay off probably this season, but in the future, I think that was a great move by Steve Yzerman. All right, so at number 7 is the Ottawa Senators. The Senators are 10, 11, and 1 on the season, 3 and 1 this week. So look at the Ottawa Senators picking things up and really getting things going this week. The last 2 or 3 weeks here in November, they are really playing some solid hockey. We'll see how long it lasts, but they're playing very well right now. The Senators, they pick up that win against the Detroit Red Wings. I believe they beat the Montreal Canadiens as well. So they're playing some good hockey. They're finding ways to pick up wins, and they seem, the games I've watched them play, they definitely don't have the skill. They have the skill at certain points. You see, guys like Anthony Duclair, coming up and scoring goals. Brady Tkachuk coming in scoring overtime winners and stuff like that. But, overall, looking at the depth, it's really not there right now. But these guys care, and I think that goes to the coaching of DJ Smith. He's done a great job so far with the Senators to start the year. And, that's probably something Toronto fans don't want to hear, but they're only 1 point back of the Toronto Maple Leafs right now. Just something to keep in mind. So, taking a look at number 6 in this week's power rankings. Speaking of another disappointing story, the Buffalo Sabres, 10, 9, and 3 on the season, 1 and 3 this week. They're doing it again, Sabres fans. They're doing it again. They're playing like the Buffalo Bills. They come out strong to start the season, make you believe, and decide they don't want to play anymore. The good news, though, is Rasmus Ristolainen did score a goal the other night, so he scored his first goal of the season. But he's one of the guys, we've talked about with the Buffalo Sabres. It's seeming like all the time. Robin Lehner couldn't find success there. Goes to the island with the Islanders, finds a ton of success. Patrick Berglund didn't even want to bother playing in Buffalo. He just said, keep your money, I'm out of here. I'm going back home. He went back to his home country, and see you later, Sabres. Ryan O'Reilly, said, when the Blues were on their Stanley Cup run last year, he said he didn't want to play hockey anymore when he was with the Sabres. Evander Kane seemed to struggle when he got there from Winnipeg. He's in San Jose now. He's doing pretty well with the San Jose Sharks. The list goes on and on. All these players that can have success in Buffalo, they move somewhere else, and all of a sudden they have all this success. It really makes you wonder, is this ownership not really building the right culture, or is it management? Is it personnel? What is it with the Buffalo Sabres? And I think it's a combination of everything, honestly. Obviously the owners choose who the personnel is in the locker room. The Pagulas do a very nice job. They actually built the Penn State hockey rink, which I think is a nice thing. But, they have some issues, and, they go off the limb here a little bit, picking up different guys. They pick up the Pittsburgh Penguins assistant general manager, Jason Botterill, to be their management guy. But I don't know what to say. I mean, Jack Eichel's playing well. Uh, the rookie seems to have kind of fallen off. Um, I mean, it happens. It happens. But you need depth. And again, I feel like I say this for a couple of teams, but the depth has been an issue here for Buffalo. The goaltending hasn't been, it's been mediocre, maybe even a little less. Carter Hutton hasn't performed to the level I think Sabres fans want him to. And Ralph Kruger, he just might not have the touch with this team. We'll see how long it lasts. He's probably got a pretty long leash considering, uh, how the team is. But this is a team, we just saw what the Toronto Maple Leafs did, and it's a good segue into the Leafs, who just fired their head coach Mike Babcock. I wonder if the Buffalo Sabres would be interested in a guy like Mike Babcock. They were swirling. They seemed to be the favorite for him a couple of years back when he left the Detroit Red Wings. Toronto swooped in and took Mike Babcock. I wonder if the Sabres are going to look at that again uh, during this season. At some point. All right, speaking of those Toronto Maple Leafs who fired Mike Babcock, the Toronto Maple Leafs are at number 5 in this week's power rankings. 10-10-4 on the season, 1-3 this week. They did pick up their win last night since firing Mike Babcock. So Sheldon Keefe is 1-0 with the Maple Leafs. So he's undefeated with the Leafs. Arizona Coyotes were the unfortunate opponent in that one. Austin Matthews picks up a goal in his hometown in Arizona. So a homecoming there for Matthews, and he got a goal in that one. They seem to be playing a lot better, specifically defensively. They pick up a shutout. Wow, look at that. The Toronto Maple Leafs with a shutout. And there's been a pretty solid Arizona Coyotes team as well. They're in the midst. They're just finishing up a road trip here, and they find a way to get things done. Really good job by the Maple Leafs. They're one of those teams. You look at different sports. If certain teams aren't performing, it's not good for the sport. I think Toronto is a good example of that because all the focus is on Toronto, whether they're winning or losing, or even if they're winning, there's issues with the team. So, they are under a microscope, and I think Montreal is another good example of that. The Boston Bruins, if those teams aren't playing well, those original 6 franchises, it's good for the game when those teams are playing well, they're finding success. It's not so fun when they're not. Obviously, the goals against have been an issue for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they find a way to get a shutout last night. So congrats to the Leafs, and hopefully this is a sign of things moving forward. They had a couple of tough games. They lost to the Bruins at home earlier this week. They lost to the Pittsburgh Penguins, 6-1 in a thumping game in Pittsburgh, starting that road trip. And they went to Vegas. They lost to Vegas, Mike Babcock's last game. So they definitely had a tough week, and hopefully there's a sign of things to come here for the Leafs, and could easily find themselves in the top 3 once again, possibly as soon as next week in the power rankings. So number 4 is the Florida Panthers. So the Panthers are 12-5-5 on the season, and a perfect 3-0 this week, so they're undefeated this week. They got to stop, allowing teams to come at it, and this is the same thing that Toronto has been doing. They seem to come back in all these games. They did it last night against the Anaheim Ducks, down 4 goals, come back, win it in 5-4 in overtime. That's great, but you can't do that. And really at this, the back half of the season, the second half of the season, probably from, January and February on, teams are going to be so conservative, you're not going to find those, those opportunities. And it's good that Joe Quenneville has them doing this. You look at the Islanders, they've kind of been doing the same thing. Toronto has been giving up the first goal in 18 of their first 24 games. So, it's an issue that teams across the league have. It's how they handle it, which has a lot to do with it. And also puck luck. I mean, let's be honest. These teams are so close. 1 inch of, the puck going a little wide or going off the post and backing in. I mean, there's so much at play. The Panthers are finding success. So we'll see how long this lasts, but they find themselves at number 4 in this week's power rankings. All right, so at number 3, not moving, is the Montreal Canadiens. 11-6-5 on the season, 1-1-2 this week. Montreal Canadiens are playing fairly well. They did lose to the New Jersey Devils in overtime at home. That was a pretty stinging loss in that one, but they've played decent. I mean, you're not going to be perfect every week, but the Canadiens definitely have some issues. The goal scoring seemed to evaporate this week a little bit. What happens, they've got some injuries. Paul Byron's out now, so that's just another guy that they lose up front. in a pretty, let's be honest, a pretty weak forward core to begin with. Just got a little weaker with Byron out. So, now you have Ryan Poehling out and guys like that. So they got to figure out, Jesperi Kotkaniemi as well. So they've got a couple of injuries. That's going to affect your team overall. So they're still at 500 nonetheless, even through all these injuries. So we'll see what they can do moving forward. So staying at number 2 this week is the Tampa Bay Lightning. They are 10-7-2 on the season, 1-2 on the week. So the Tampa Bay Lightning weren't so great this week. They definitely had some good, they played well in the one game, but, besides that, Tampa Bay, it's like, it's the same thing as the Canadiens. It's consistently playing well. They didn't do it this week, but throughout the course of the season so far, they've been pretty good. I think it's lack of motivation, and we've seen that from other teams that are more motivated. The Tampa Bay Lightning are a little bit more conservative here to start the season than they were, the last 2 years. Is this the year that this Tampa Bay team gets it done, or do they want to go under the radar and kind of just sneak their way to the Stanley Cup final and see what happens? All right, so number 1 is the Boston Bruins. They find themselves at the top, and it was a little bit of a scare last week. They rebounded this week. 15-3-4 on the season, 4-0 on the week, so a very good week for the Boston Bruins. Goaltending has been solid, as we've talked about. Yaroslav Halak and Tuukka Rask, one of the best goalie tandems in the league right now. The first line has been good with Marchand, Bergeron, and Pasternak. They've found a way to continue that success there. The defense has been solid. They're just finding ways to win, and that's really, at the end of the day, all that matters. They continue to do well as they did last season, keeping that momentum moving into this season. They beat the Leafs on the road in Toronto. That was a good win there for Boston. They really pounced on the New Jersey Devils on the road. So good job by the Boston Bruins, and they continue on their streak. So that's it for the Eastern Conference. Let's head to the West Coast. All right, so number 8 in the Pacific Division, taking a look at the Pacific, is the Los Angeles Kings. So the Kings are 9-12-1 on the season, 2-1 this week. So the Kings had a pretty solid week. They've shown stretches that they can play well like this. They just beat the Edmonton Oilers last night at home, stopping McDavid and Draisaitl and that whole group, shutting them out at home. So a good job by the Kings. A great home game there. They're on a little bit of a homestand here. So this is good. Hopefully they could get some momentum here heading into Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving. So we'll see what the Kings can do with that. So taking a look at number 7 is the San Jose Sharks. The Sharks are 11-1 on the season. A lot of ones there in their record. 2-1 this week. So the San Jose Sharks, I'm wearing their jersey because they are playing some very solid hockey over the last week. They beat the Detroit Red Wings in a pretty solid game at home. Had to take a shootout. Nonetheless, though, they picked up a victory in that one. They have been really solid here. They're really taking advantage of their homestand that they're on. Hopefully they could build up some confidence heading into the next, second quarter of the season here. So we'll see what happens with the Sharks, but definitely a lot of good signs for the Sharks moving into this part of the season. Can't say the same for this team. At number 6 is the Calgary Flames, 10-12-3 on the season, 0-4 this week. So the Calgary Flames have really taken a dive, a real step back. You look at the Maple Leafs in the East, the comparable to the in the Western Conference seems to be the Calgary Flames. The Flames have struggled. There's been moments where Matthew Tkachuk has played pretty well, but this team is so overshadowed by some of these other teams in the Pacific Division. It's been an issue for the Calgary Flames. There's been rumors that Johnny Gaudreau could be on the move. I don't know how serious of conversation that is, but when there's smoke, there's usually fire as well with that. So we'll see what happens. Again, I think the big problem with the Calgary Flames coming into the season, we weren't sold. I necessarily wasn't sold on the goaltending. David Rittich had a pretty good season last year, but then you bring in Cam Talbot, who has struggled. He was in Philly, he struggled. In Edmonton, he struggled. The only real success he had was with the New York Rangers, who seem to have stolen a first-round pick from the Oilers, or actually a second or third-round pick, I don't remember. But they stole a pick there because Cam Talbot's really not much value at this point. So it's a shame for Cam Talbot. hoping to build something there in Calgary. There's a long season to go, but I don't know how much more leash he's going to have at this point. The Calgary Flames are really struggling. Hopefully they could turn that around moving forward. This really bothers me. So number 5 this week is the Anaheim Ducks. So the Anaheim Ducks are 10-10-3 on the season, 1-1-1 this week. I think that's a nice record this week, considering how awful they played. The Anaheim Ducks, they had such a good start to this season, and they're playing like, they kind of remind me of comparables between the Eastern and the Western Conference. The Buffalo Sabres, how hot they were to start the season, that's how the Anaheim Ducks are looking to me. They had a good start to the season, and over the last month here in November, completely fell apart. I don't know what's going on. They lose to the Florida Panthers, up 4-0 at one point to the Panthers. They lose it in overtime, 5-4. I don't know what to say. And you start to question again. John Gibson, through the first 2 or 3 months of last season, kept the Ducks alive. And then eventually he sank as well. He was overplayed, and the team couldn't find any success. And they were pretty far from, the only reason they were even in the playoff hunt at the end of the season was because of how bad, that last wild card spot, how easy it was to really get in that spot. It's a shame because the Anaheim Ducks really had a good start to the year. The defense looked really solid. The system that we've seen from the Ducks, but it's really fallen apart since then. We'll see what happens with the Ducks, but the goaltending, I'm a little bit concerned about Gibson. He's one of the best goaltenders in the league, but it's either him or the defense really struggling for the Anaheim Ducks, and I'm becoming alarmingly concerned with the Ducks. The offense isn't there, and we knew that coming into the season, but the defense should be their hallmark, their main point this season, and even that's struggling. So we'll see what happens with the Ducks. So at number 4 is the Vancouver Canucks, 11-8-4 on their season, 1-1-1 this week. Their one win coming against the one of their losses coming against the Colorado Avalanche last Saturday. It was a tough game, the whole Calvert incident. They didn't end up winning the game. They picked up a point, luckily. They beat up the Nashville Predators last night 6-2. I believe it was 6-2. But they, on the road in Nashville, they take advantage of a pretty struggling Nashville Predators team recently, and we'll get into them when we look at the Central. But the Vancouver Canucks, the goaltending has been, iffy at best at certain points over the last month or two here to start this season. But once they get guys back, we've seen Brock Besser, in and out of the lineup with injuries, and a couple of other guys. Adam Gaudette has looked really solid for the Vancouver Canucks, so hopefully he continues that. And the defense has been pretty solid as well. Tyler Myers doing a good job, as well as Quinn Hughes. So the Canucks definitely have some strong points to look forward to. We'll just see what happens with the Canucks. They're in a good spot. They could really move up if they have a good week. Fortunately, they could really move down if they have a bad one as well. All right, so take a look at number 3 is the Vegas Golden Knights, 11-9-4 on the season, 2-1-1 this week. So the Vegas Golden Knights have been interesting here to start this season. They have really had high expectations. They're going to be one of the best teams in the Western Conference. They've definitely had some issues here over the last month. They came into the season, playing pretty average hockey, and now they're just playing okay. They did have a winning record this week, which is good. They pick up 5 out of a possible 8 points, but I don't know. I'm a little bit concerned about the Vegas Golden Knights. They just seem a little bit, again, Marc-Andre Fleury is such a solid goaltender. It seems like whenever they put in Malcolm Subban, they seem to struggle a little bit. Again, it happens with other teams too. Toronto seems to be having issues with that as well, which they did. They picked up a big victory against the Maple Leafs at home. They played average hockey this week, and I think there's a lot to improve on for the Vegas Golden Knights, but we've seen that Pacific Division kind of, it's in murky water. You really have the Los Angeles Kings, even the Kings. It seems like anybody from 8-3, it's kind of wide open. Even, it's just so weird right now how this division looks. Teams are going up and down and sliding around, and I don't know. It's definitely a weird look here in the Pacific. All right, so moving all the way up to number 2. So because of this weird division and the way things have been shaking out, the Arizona Coyotes find themselves the highest they've been in the goal line hockey power rankings history. They are up to number 2, the highest they've ever been. 13, 8-2 on the season, 2-1 this week. Their one loss coming against the Leafs last night. But before that, they have really played some really good hockey here since mid-October. They've struggled a little bit out of the gate the first 6 or 7 games, and they've really turned it on since then. Connor Garland's been playing very well for the Coyotes. Darcy Kemper in goal has been really solid. I feel like I'm talking about Kemper every week, but he's been really good for the Coyotes, keeping them in most of their games. The Coyotes looking pretty solid right now. All right, so at number 1, staying at the top, is the Edmonton Oilers in the Pacific Division. 14-7-3 on the season, 1-1-1 this week. So the Oilers have been spiraling a little bit here over the last 2 weeks. They're still playing very good hockey. The Coyotes really aren't that far behind at this point. Only 3 points ahead of the Coyotes. And again, this is an Oilers team that really nobody expected them to be where they are. But it seems like, we saw even the other night against the Los Angeles Kings, they were shut down in that game against the Kings, and their offense was silent. Once they shut down Draisaitl and McDavid, there really wasn't much else there. And the goaltending, Mike Smith can only hold up for so long. He is an older goaltender, so how many games is he going to play this year? The backup is going to have to be just as good for the Edmonton Oilers. So we'll see how long this lasts for the Oilers, but it's starting to show, some cracks here for the Oilers. We talked about, adjusting to different teams, how to, maybe expose some weaknesses. You talked about the Islanders, people having a hard time finding their weaknesses. They don't have the puck. How do you attack this team even when they don't have the puck? It seems like the Oilers, you just shut down their top guys, and it should be a pretty easy ride. Fortunately, that seems to be the scenario for the Oilers. But the Oilers stay at the top of the division. So good for the Oilers. Let's take a look at the Central. All right, so taking a look at the Central Division, taking a look at number 7 is the Minnesota Wild. So 9-11-2 on the season, 2-0-1 this week. The Minnesota Wild are actually playing some very good hockey, a 2-game winning streak for the Wild, so good for them. They've been playing well, though, and they were talking about it last night during the broadcast, the Minnesota announcers. They have already played half their road games for this season. That's right. We're 20 games into the season. They've played half their road games so far in the first 20 games of the season. We're only 1/4 of the way through the season. They've already played half of their road games. So, there's a lot of hockey left, but they have played a lot of road games. And, this team, they take a lot of flack. They don't have the skill. The stars and Suter, Parise, they really aren't as good as they used to be. Devin Dubnyk has shown, some inconsistency. But the Wild have played a lot of road games. So if they find a way to turn this around here at home, they're finding goals from different guys that we really don't hear about. This is huge for the Wild. And just to get a little winning streak, they played a great game last night. They need more of this, and this is just how you build yourself as a team. You build that confidence by homestands. If you're struggling, playing at home, it goes both ways. You could look at it, all right, well, you need a road trip for the guys to bond and regroup and no distractions from local fans or media. On the road, nobody's there, but you also, it's harder to play on the road as well. So, being home sometimes is the best thing for certain teams. It just depends on the scenario. Minnesota Wild, they're playing fairly well considering they are on the road a lot, but they could definitely move up in next week's power rankings if they play the way they are right now. It's a weird division here in the Central. Kind of reminds me of the Pacific. It's pretty wide open overall. Besides, between 7 and 5 here, those 3 teams are kind of intertwined, and it's definitely an interesting look in the Central. So this is the lowest this team has been in the power rankings. I'm sure this team knows who I'm going to be talking about because of how poor not only they played this week, but over the last week or 2, even 3 weeks here in November. The Nashville Predators are at number 6 in this week's power rankings. They were argued to be one of the top teams in the beginning of November for the Central Division. They really toppled this week, and this was the week the hammer came down on the Preds. 9-8-3 on the season, 0-3 this week. Last night was the statement game for this. They played at home against the Vancouver Canucks, who would argue they're a middle-of-the-pack team in the Pacific Division, and they get stomped on 6-2 to the Vancouver Canucks. Definitely some issues for the Predators that need to be addressed. They give up a lot of goals. That's been a real issue here for the Predators. This is another team you wonder if Peter Laviolette could be on the hot seat. There are high expectations for this Nashville Predators team. How much of a leash does Laviolette have at this point? They have not. Remember the last time they won the President's Trophy, went to the Stanley Cup Finals. That was 3 years ago now. It's been a while for the Predators, so maybe a new coach. We'll have to wait and see. There is a guy from Toronto that just got released. I wonder if they'd be in the mix on a guy like Babcock. Definitely some issues with the Predators. They need to fix that. But that's pretty much it. I don't know what else to say. They need to put things together. There's some issues with some forwards there. There's been some Ryan Johansson rumors. Okay. So at number 5 is the Chicago Blackhawks. 9-9-4 on the season. 2-2 this week. Blackhawks had a pretty solid week overall. They exchange goals with a lot of the teams they're playing now. They remind me of the Leafs last year. They're just back and forth scoring goals and running up the score. Patrick Kane is on a real good point streak. He's playing really well. Alex DeBrincat as well, playing very well. Robin Lehner in goal has been very solid for the Chicago Blackhawks. They're starting to put together some pretty decent weeks. They're 2-2 this week. So if they keep those piling on and then you get a good winning streak 1 or 2 weeks, the Blackhawks find themselves in a relatively mediocre division right now. They could find a way to build things up. This could be really good for the Chicago Blackhawks. All right, so at number 4 this week is the Winnipeg Jets. 13-9-1 on the season, 2-1 this week. Their lone loss this week coming last night. They were down 3-0 to the Dallas Stars. Seems like they could have packed it in and finished it off. Man, there were a lot of comebacks this week. The Islanders and Minnesota, Florida. What's up with that? Anyway, the Winnipeg Jets, Lucas Spiza got his first goal of the season, tying that game at 3. As they're announcing the goal, even before they may have announced it, Jamie Benn comes down the other way and gives the Dallas Stars the lead. It was just a crushing goal there for the Winnipeg Jets. Came all the way back and tied it, and they ended up losing. That's been the story of the season so far for Winnipeg. They've been playing pretty decent games, and then just, all of a sudden it just gets away from them. And they really could have gotten a point in that game. They really deserved one, considering how things went, but it doesn't always work out that way. All right, so they lost that one 5-3. They did beat the Florida Panthers as well earlier this week, so that was a good win for the Winnipeg Jets, but where's Patrick Laine? I feel like we say this it seems like ever since he was drafted. Obviously, his first year was really solid. We're starting to see issues with Patrick Laine. Kyle Connor has been, where has Kyle Connor been? The goaltending's been spotty at different points. The Winnipeg Jets definitely have some issues, and I don't even get involved in the defense. That's a whole separate issue. But the Winnipeg Jets, again, the positive, they have some really good skilled players. The negatives, they're not really executing enough, consistently. Because, you look at, this division, it's a pretty okay division, and they're playing well in an okay division. But the upper tier teams, you look at Dallas, St. Louis, Colorado, would I put Winnipeg in that category, in that stratosphere? I don't think so. At least from what they've shown me so far this season. All right, so at number 3 is the Colorado Avalanche, 13-7-2 on the season, 2-1 this week. Colorado Avalanche had a pretty nice week this week. They're playing well. Even without Mikko Rantanen, they're finding ways to win games. different guys seemingly coming in every night in goal. They're finding a way, even with inconsistent, not a steady goaltending tandem right now because of injuries and things like that, which is out of their control. They're finding ways to pick up wins. Nathan MacKinnon continuing to be on fire. Landeskog and that defensive core is playing really well. Nazem Kadri picking up some points. So I believe he's on like a 10 or 12 game point streak. I don't know, but he's playing really well there for the Colorado Avalanche. So at number 2 in this week's power rankings is the St. Louis Blues. So they get knocked off the top this week, 14-4-4 on the season, 2-1-1 this week. So they had some pretty good hockey this week, and in pretty much all the games they played. Obviously you didn't win them all, but they played well in all those games, and you can't win them all. That's just how it is. You pick up 5 out of a possible 7 points. 5 out of a possible 8 points this week. I always seem to struggle with that. But at the end of the day, really good start to the season here for the St. Louis Blues. They're winning more than they're losing. That's all you could really say, and they're doing well with that right now. So that leaves at the top spot for the Central Division this week at number 1 is the Dallas Stars. 13-8-2 on the season, 3-0 this week. Just a reminder, and make sure to check out our video where we take a little bit of a deeper dive in the Dallas Stars' success recently. As I mentioned earlier, they beat the Winnipeg Jets in a really good game there. They were up 3, gave up the lead. Jamie Benn came right back, give the Stars the lead, get an empty netter, and they end up winning that game. They are 11-1-1 in their last 13 games. The Dallas Stars started the season 2-7-1 in their first 10 games. They're really finding success now. Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, Radek Faksa, Joe Pavelski, Miro Heiskanen, they're all finding ways to put up points. The goaltending has been as solid as it's been since the tandem of Hudobin and Bishop was created last summer. So they are really on fire, and they're finding, they're firing on all cylinders now. The defense has been steadily good. A guy nobody talks about, Roman Polak, really keeping guys out of the front. This team is playing really good hockey, and good for the Dallas Stars. They really are becoming a team that is going to be difficult to mess with heading here into the holidays and into 2020. So that's it for this week's power rankings here in Week 9. So just a reminder, the Dallas Stars are at the top of the Central Division this week. The Edmonton Oilers stay at the top of the Pacific. The Boston Bruins stay at the top of the Atlantic. The New York Islanders are at the top of the Metro. So thank you for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe. Make sure to check every Friday for our weekly power rankings. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.